So today I'm going to revisit the topic of what makes a deck good. And in this video, I'll be focusing on what makes a card a brick versus what makes a card an excellent card. I will be using 3 examples, so Ryzeal, because this is presumably the best deck in the TCG on release, Snake Eyes, because it has stepped out of the limelight and is now majorly hit from before, but still a popular deck, and also White Forest. Because most of my viewers, I think, are White Forest enjoyers like myself, I will cover, I think, White Forest as Amina from Supreme Darkness format, because that's really the most interesting, unique, powerful, and probably meta-relevant version of the deck. It's just not legal yet. Okay, so first of all, let me just give you a brief history of bricks here, so that people who are newer and people who are older have an idea of what I'm talking about and what I actually mean when I say the word brick. So, Gem Knight Garnet is the first card, at least that I can remember, that people really associated with being a true brick. So for those who don't know, or for those who want a brief trip down memory lane, Brilliant Fusion back in the day was one of the most broken cards ever printed. So this said, when this card is activated, fusion summon a Gem Knight Fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your deck as fusion material. This is way before, years and years before Albaz Strike came out or Branded Fusion ever existed. So using materials from your deck was a next generation concept. And what would happen is people would make this card, Gem Knight Seraphonite, and this gave you an extra normal summon. So remember, not only are we using cards from the deck as fusion material back in the day, but getting an extra normal summon is absolutely crazy stuff. That is what Nightmare Goblin was banned for. Now, the thing with Gem Knight Garnet is that this is really a true brick. It's a true brick because this card says that you use monsters from your deck as fusion material. You cannot use monsters from your hand, or from your grave, or from banishment, or from anywhere else. They must be in your deck. So, if you draw Gem Knight Garnet, it breaks the combo. This is a true brick. If we look at another example of the Psyframe cards, Gamma says, when your opponent activates a monster effect while you control no monsters, you can special summon both this card from your hand and one Psyframe driver from your hand, deck, or graveyard. And if you do, negate that activation, and if you do that, destroy that monster. So the driver, which is a brick, it could still be in your hand. You could have drawn it. It won't break you from using the Gamma. It could be in your grave even, or it could be in your deck. And so Psyframe Driver is a brick, but it's not the hardest brick, where Garnet really was the hardest brick. There are other true hard bricks, like if you play the Super Heavy package, where you don't want to draw the Big Banky, because then you have nothing to search and the combo breaks, but you also don't want to play a second one, because then the chance of you drawing the brick goes up. The general percent for this, I'm just going to also reference a probability calculator while I go through this video. If you were playing a single driver, then the chance of you opening that driver in a 40 card deck, if you're going first, was 12.5%. If you're going second, it was 15%. So it's not a negligible percentage of the time. It's actually a pretty substantial percentage if you think about playing in like a longer tournament, or just play testing a lot, or you're in a long locals. So with that as the basis of what a brick is, let me use Ryzeal as the first example before going on to Snake Eye and then the fan favorite, White Forest. Now, we've come a long way where these days a lot of the cards that people will call bricks are really very far away from stuff like Psyframe Driver and certainly from Gem Knight Garnet. In a lot of cases, these cards like Ryzeal Plugin and Ryzeal Cross, you don't want to draw them, but it's way less bad to draw them if you're going first than if you're going second. If you're going second, having extremely high-quality engine cards to be able to play through interruptions, or high-quality non-engine cards to stop your opponent from being able to play so that your engine cards can go through, is very important. So even though drawing Plugin and Cross don't break your combo, you still don't want to draw these cards, because it's one less interaction that you have to stop your opponent making their board, or one less engine piece to be able to establish your own board when you go second. So let's say that we are counting Plasma Hole, Plugin, and Cross as our soft bricks for Ryzeal. So in this 42 card deck, this is a somewhat standard-ish build. In this 42 card deck, if I pull up the probability calculator here, if you are going first, the probability of you drawing one of those 3 bricks is 32%. So this is basically like the typical, you know, if you have 3 of a card, what's the chance of drawing it? It's basically like a third of the time you're going to draw any 3 of in your deck. So that's a very easy reference point where like a driver that's a 1 of is like a 12% chance, and a 3 of is like a third of the time, like a 33-ish% chance. Now, if you're going second, that 32.3% in a 42 card deck goes up to 37.8%. It's somewhat of an increase. It's not like a huge deal. It is slightly more. And one thing that I should mention that is absolutely core to this entire discussion of what makes a brick or high quality card a high quality card is that deck building is focused around game 1. This is something that casual players have trouble grasping, I think. And a lot of casual players like to put in cards because theoretically, if you get to a certain part of the combo, then, you know, this card would be useful. The thing is that if you have things that are really, really good with your engine, those should be in your side deck if there is space for it. But your game 1, you are building your deck around not knowing if you're going first or second. The thing with cross and plugin is that they're so good and so drastic of an improvement to your ceiling that there is no argument for taking them out of your deck just in case you go second. Now let's go to Snake Eyes now to talk about what is now a far worse deck in terms of the quality of their actual engine cards, which is not the point of this video, but just to talk about the quality of the bricks that Snake Eyes has to play. So here are 3 soft bricks, which you don't want to draw them going first, but you can accept it. Going second, you don't ever want to see any of these ever. So Snake Eyes, I would say that there's like a decent amount of variance in Snake Eye decks these days. You can imagine that there's no Fenrir if you don't like that there's a Fenrir in the deck and that we're just playing a clean 40. You will see some versions of Snake Eyes now that will play Dominus Impulse, and they will be on this card to kind of make up for it, where instead of a Desiree, you have an early. And so when you use your Flamberge to bring out your Masquerena, or maybe you've used the Temple to bring out the Masquerena and your Flamberge to bring out something else, the early will give you a Monster Negate. But I think that version is worse. But here's the issue with this deck. Let us say that there are Temple, Lurie, because you never want to normal summon this. In fact, the Lacrima, which is technically not like a brick in a vacuum, you don't want to normal summon this either, because you always want to normal summon your Snake Eye Ash, for example, or an Oak, depending on what the situation is. Even if you don't draw access to any of these cards, you might have like the combo where you search for the original, and then you send original off of Hallowed to bring out, you know, like a Ilia Sylvia, and then you banish the original from grave to search the Snake Eye Ash, and then you do your combo that way. So there's so many ways to your normal summon that this is usually a card you never want to draw. So actually, let's count that. So let's say there's Lacrima as 1 brick. There's Divine Temple, which you can tolerate drawing, and it doesn't break your combo, but you would never ever want to draw this even if you were going first, because it drastically reduces the quality of the engine in your hand. So we're going to say there's Lacrima is a suboptimal draw. Temple is suboptimal. That's 2. Lurie is 3. Flamberge is 4. Snake Eyes Diabel is 5. Hallowed is 6. Unfortunately, this is probably the worst card because it's very bad either side of the dice roll. Silhouettric, which could be Azurune, is 7. This is another card where you could tolerate it if you go first, but you'd still never ever want to draw this. And it feels very bad to, for example, make a rabbit if you've already drawn this just to get the rabbit's other effect. So let's say that we're at 7 cards in a 43 card deck. So if I pull out the probability calculator here, and I say that I'm at a 43 card deck, and we're going first, so we have 5 cards in our hand. If I have 7 suboptimal draws, the chance of me drawing at least one of these cards is 60.8%. If I go second, that goes up to 68%. Now what happens if I'm going first? You may be thinking, well, drawing one of those bricks is not really a big deal. So what if you draw the Lacrima? It doesn't break your combo. You can still special summon it off of the Requiem. You know, so what if you draw the Hallowed? If you still have access to the Deception, you can still use it as normal, or the Silhouettric or whatever. But what happens if you draw 2 of these cards? So the chance of you drawing at least 1 was 60%. The chance of you drawing at least 2 is 18% going first. Or if you're going second, it's 25%. Imagine that a quarter of the time when you're going second with this deck, you're going to draw not just 1, but a minimum of 2 of these suboptimal draws that we're basically calling these cards bricks. This is really not acceptable in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And so even if you were to say that this deck has the same quality starters or can play the same number of non-engine cards as Ryzeal. Just the number of bricks, or if you don't want to call these cards bricks, of clearly suboptimal draws is so drastically higher that in a quarter of your games when you go second, you're going to draw at least 2 of these cards. I think that this basically means that a deck can't be good. You know, like this makes a deck a high variance deck at best. It makes it to where you're high rolling based on what you draw. Kind of like what Tier Limits was like before Agido and Kelbeck were banned, where it was kind of like a lottery deck. Where, you know, everything had been hit besides the millers, and you were just hoping that you would be able to start playing. And the deck could still do the most unfair things imaginable, or it could do absolutely nothing. So you don't want to play a deck like this. This is not a good position to be in. This shows that your deck is not a high-quality deck because there are too many hands that you will simply not be able to outplay your opponent because you don't have enough high-quality cards for there to even be a potential for outplaying your opponent. Okay, now let's move on to the fan favorite. And this, I would say, is probably currently my favorite deck right now. So this is White Forest, Azamina, Snake Eye. This is Supreme Darkness format. I do not recommend you try to play this deck before Supreme Darkness comes out because Azamina LZ is the true connection between all 3 engines, the White Forest stuff, the Snake Eye stuff, and if you want to count it as a 3rd engine, the Azamina stuff. Now, the purpose of this video isn't to go into detail on this. I already have a deck theory and gameplay analysis on my channel on this deck, and of course when Supreme Darkness comes out, or if I make any changes to this, I'll go over that again. Now, let's look at the suboptimal draws here, compare that to the other decks, and then talk about what makes this deck good or bad or mid. So again, let's start here by saying that Flamberge is a suboptimal draw. The Engraver here is technically a brick, soft-ish brick, or like a medium rare brick because it doesn't break your combo, but you still don't want to draw it. It's a card that does nothing in your hand. So there's the Flamberge, there's the Engraver, there's the Hallowed Azamina, there's the Temple, and there's the Snake Eyes Diabellstar. So 1, 2, where were we here? 3, 4, 5. It's 2 less than in Snake Eyes, but the thing with this deck, this current iteration of the deck, is if you are maining a card like Unleashing, which I'm playing over Woes because you cannot Ash it, and it can be a little bit easier to resource management with this because this also counts stuff in your grave, not just on field. This is a card that you actually don't really mind drawing first. It's a little bit less like Ryzeal Plasma Hole or Cross or whatever because the resource is a free resource with your other cards. It's still not good to draw. It's not like a toy soldier or a tank that actually give you a body, or like in the case of soldier, actually give you another search, and so you're plussing by setting it off of like an LZ or whatever. But it does reset itself. So it is, you know, like not horrible, but still you wouldn't ever want to draw this. It's really that when you go second, you don't want to see these hard going first cards. Similarly, a card like Subversion is debatable. I'm not saying that you should play this in this deck, but in this version of the deck, what you'll find when you go through your combo is that the Poplar is something that you summon quite often, including in the opponent's turn, and so you always want something for the crackback. I show this in my gameplay analysis, so again, you can check that out. It's one of my recent videos if you want to see that. It's very, very useful to not just have another search for the Poplar, like after you've already searched for the Temple, and you've already gone through like the original, but something that specifically is useful for breaking boards. And so this is a really good spot for that, but this does nothing when you go first. So it fits into your power spell lineup where there's 3 draws. This is really like a power spell / high impact card lineup here. And this fits very well into that, but it is technically a brick going first. So this deck is a little bit harder to qualify just because when you're building for game 1, some cards are bricks or not depending on who wins the dice roll. But this is still not good. You should not have up to, you know, like the Flamberge, the Engraver, the Hallowed, the Diabell, the Snake Eyes Diabell, and the Divine Temple as your basic bricks, and then additional bricks based on if you go first or second. But the thing that really makes it hard to analyze a deck like White Forest is that it's really not like Ryzeal, where, let me pull up some of those cards, where, you know, if you have a card like Ice, this can give you literally everything. Or if you have 2 cards, like you have Ice and a great extender like X Ryzeal, you can play through multiple different interruptions very, very easily. and you can put up a very, very strong board, and you don't even have to think about what's in the rest of your hand. Whereas if you're playing a typical White Forest deck, it's a huge deal what else is in the rest of your hand. Just because you've drawn LZ, which is a phenomenal card, and in my opinion, the best card of the deck. I really don't like Esteller if you're not on the box version, because it's a lot easier to interact with the Esteller than it is in a toy box version, where even if they Imperm or Veiler it, the Soldier still comes back and gives you a plus. So even if you have an excellent card like LZ, you still have to have things that combo well with it. And the math on these types of decks is very, very different to decks that have solid one-card starters. So back in the heyday of Snake Eyes, a Bonfire could be anything, and it didn't really matter what you drew. You could have drawn a Poplar, and it's not going to break your combo. Whereas now, the Poplar's at 1, the Bonfire's a lot less valuable. It makes your hands awkward. In this type of deck, you want to draw, for example, the Azamina LZ with something else that it can play with. Like a tuner, for example, so you can synchro summon and get the search, or chain blocks or whatever. And so when you do this type of math, it's kind of like the same as, what is the chance of me drawing not just 1 brick, but 2 bricks? And so you have to count the number of engine pieces, and you say, okay, if the bare minimum to play is 2 engine pieces, what are the chances of me seeing at least 2 of those pieces? So I don't want to go too in-depth into that, because this video is supposed to be more about bricks, and I also don't want to make this a very long video. But the point of me bringing this up now is to say, not only does Ryzeal have far less bricks, and much softer bricks that are actually not that bad to draw going first, just you don't want to draw them going second. They don't have the same issue of having to draw multiple engine pieces, even if they're high quality engine pieces, just to be able to play properly. So in addition to being able to play like 20 hand traps if they want, or adding in other engines like the shark stuff and then playing less hand traps, or just playing power spell instead, the engine itself is a phenomenal engine. I will go back to Ryzeal for a second here just to give you an idea of that. You could start your turn by summoning X Ryzeal, an inherent summon, and sending the aggregator, and immediately forcing a response from your opponent. And this is just with an engine card. I mean, it's insane that you have a deck where an engine piece is also an interruption against your opponent. So the quality of the cards is so drastically different that this is really just head and shoulders above the other decks in terms of how reliably powerful the deck is. It's one thing to have a ceiling. It's another to access that ceiling every single or 9 out of 10 games. The last thing that I'll show here, just so this doesn't sound too conceptual, is just give you a bit of an idea of what it means to have ceiling. And I'll use Ryzeal Plasma Hole as an example here. So let me go to my replays, and if anyone knows if it's possible for you to control the opponent in Omega, please let me know. I don't like using Edo Pro. I want to show you an example of why you might want to play a card like Plasma Hole. There are lots of niche scenarios that you wouldn't typically think of where you can do things that you could never otherwise do. Now, because I can't control or don't know how to control my opponent, let's just pretend that it is my turn, okay? And let's pretend that this Bone Mouse is an Imperm, okay? So let's say I have set up a Rafflesia on my field and I have a Duo Drive. And I activate my Duo Drive so that I detach the 2 materials and I can search 2 different Ryzeal cards, okay? And my opponent chains an Imperm, this Bone Mouse is an Imperm, and they target my Duo Drive, okay? So here's an example of sealing. With the Rafflesia, we can detach to send Ryzeal Plasma Hole because it is a whole card, so that you can use this off of Rafflesia. And the effect that we're copying here is the first effect. Target face-up cards your opponent controls up to the number of Ryzeal XYZ monsters you control, which is 1, it's just a Duo Drive. Destroy them. Then you can attach a Ryzeal card from your graveyard to a rank 4 XYZ monster you control. That's less important right now. So in this same chain, okay, we have Chainlink 1 Imperm targeting, we have Chainlink 1 Duo Drive to detach on resolution to search 2 Ryzeal cards, and we basically need this to resolve. This is why in like every Ryzeal video you see, people are holding their hand traps for the Duo Drive. So Chainlink 1 Duo Drive, Chainlink 2 Imperm targeting the Duo Drive, Chainlink 3 Rafflesia to send Hole to pop the Bone Mouse. We can also, because Hole is now in the graveyard, use Hole's effect to banish it from grave as cost, and then immediately after this effect resolves, XYZ summon an XYZ monster using monsters we control, including a Ryzeal monster. So we can overlay on top of the Duo Drive the full armored Utopic Ray Lancer. So now, by using a Rafflesia, which has actual other good targets like Gravedigger's Trap Hole, to pop the Imperm, really we just wanted the Plasma Hole in the grave to be able to overlay on top of the Duo Drive so that we would dodge the imperm, because now imperm has no target, so it fizzles. That's an example of sealing in a deck that's not just purely speculative. Obviously, you're not going to be using that exact scenario all the time, but I just want to show you, there are like lots of cool interactions that come up if you're playing these cards that do increase your ceiling. So that's my basic overview on what a brick is and what makes a deck good. And I think that this should provide like a simple idea of why Ryzeal is a good deck. The engine cards are excellent besides Node, which is the only true extender that's not a starter. The others can also like usually function as starters, although Ice is the best one. You have a protection card like Crossout, if the hand trap build is the most common one, to insulate your engine. You have cards like Desires and Bonfire. And then when the 7th cards come out, 7th Tachyon, there is a number target in the extra deck that will allow you to search for your light monsters, I believe. So the engine will become more reliable when this card comes out. You won't have to play riskier cards like Desires. You can just play the 7th Tachyon instead. And then you have so many options as to what other engine you want to play. And then there's the quality of your hand traps isn't going to change. You could play Power Spell, whatever you want. So yeah, if you have any critiques, comments, thoughts, let me know. If you want to join the Discord, the link will be in the description. Thanks for watching.